Hey, everybody. My name is Bob Phillips. I'm an author, composer, and clinician for Alfred Publishing. I'm a retired editor there, string editor, and I'm so excited to be together today with one of Alfred Music's incredible string composers, Doug Spata. Doug is actually a clarinetist by training, but he's an outstanding string writer and has been for many, many years. His unique style has made his works favored among teachers, students, and audiences, and his award-winning music has been performed around the US and the world. So it's great to have you here, Doug, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks very much. I'm thrilled to be here.
So, Doug, one of the questions I'd like to ask you is, who is your most influential teacher and why? What was it about them that really influenced you to pursue music, to enjoy music, to change your life, whatever it might be? What would you say to that?
I was really fortunate enough to have a few different teachers in my high school and junior high years. Pete Metzger was my high school band director. Great guy. He's still active around in the area in Cincinnati where I live, and introduced us to great repertoire, had a fantastic work ethic about practicing, and really introduced us to a whole lot of different opportunities, which is something that I really appreciate a lot. The other one that comes to mind, is, sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
The other one that comes to mind is my private teacher. I took private clarinet lessons for 7 or 8 years, from like 7th grade on through high school. And his name is Mark Dotterman. And when I first started to get an interest in composing music and learning about composing music and orchestration and things like that, my parents actually hired him for an extra half-hour lesson just to talk about music theory and talk about orchestration. And he was he'd been through all the college courses, so he just kind of taught me what he remembered from his college courses, and would look at the things I wrote and comment on them and help me work out things about harmonies and counterpoints. And it was really the first composition lessons I ever had. And I like to say that he's really the only composition teacher that I ever had.
So your high school band director, you talked about his incredible process. Clearly, with his military background, and he probably had a lot of structure in place. What were the things about the process with practicing that helped you progress as a musician? What were a few key tips that you learned from him?
The basics about how to practice really came up a lot. It was short segments, lots of repetition. Take it slow at first, then build slowly up. And that was really fundamental. We do that in class, and he'd explain that this is what we need to be doing at home, that kind of thing.
So, as an educational composer, which I think, of course, is different than being a professional composer in the sense that, although educational composers are professionals, but instead of writing for professional ensembles, as an educational writer, we're writing for students, we're writing for kids, and we have to make sure that we're engaging them. We have to make sure that all instruments are engaged in all sections and that kind of thing. I'm sure you have a process. I can't help but notice, just parenthetically, you have a couple old pinball machines in the back, and it's in your studio. So I'm guessing maybe that could be a little part of your process too. So when you start composing a new piece of music, talk about your process and what you go through, and how you find inspiration or structure or whatever it is. Just talk about your process.
Actually, when I first start a piece of music, I'll start on this side with the piano. It usually starts with broad strokes first and then gets more detailed as I work on. So I'll start with just a chord progression. I'll pick a key. I'll decide, what's level of ensemble I want to work for. And from there, decide what key, what meter, generally what style I'm going for. And then come up with a chord progression. come up with a rhythm that the chord progression can go in, that the kids can approach. And as an ostinato, as a background, I'll write the backgrounds first. And a lot of people are surprised to hear that I'll actually write the melodies last. So we'll start with the accompaniment parts first, and then figure out what melody would go on top of that, or beneath that, or whoever gets the melody. And yeah, the pinball machines are fun. This is the tip of the iceberg. This is 2 out of my 9 machines. The other 7 are downstairs. And I find that distraction is an important part of the creative process, that sometimes I get really stuck and focused on what I'm doing and writing, and it's just not coming and nothing sounds right. And that if I were to just take my conscious brain away and focus on something else, play five balls of pinball downstairs on one of my machines, my subconscious brain is still working on the problem in the background. And then I can come back with fresh eyes, and usually the answer just kind of appears, and it's obvious once I've taken a break and come back.
So I had the privilege of serving as your editor for a number of years. So I actually know your music intimately well, and a big fan, because obviously otherwise I would not have been selecting your music every year. But one of the things that I find interesting about you as a composer is many of the educational writers, myself included, do arranging, original writing, do pop music, a lot of different things. But you've tended to stay in the Doug Spata original categories. And what I find interesting about that, and here's kind of a question coming out of it, is that there's a very definite Doug Spata style, I think. But saying that, the pieces are so different piece to piece. Mm-hmm. So how do you sort of, on the one hand, I guess what I'm saying is there's sort of a box I can put you in terms of this is a Spata style, but then there's a whole part of me that says, no, it's anything and everything. So how do you sort of see yourself that way? How do you think about your style and what it is you do?
Well, thank you first. Well, geez, I've tried doing arrangements. I've tried doing some other things. Anything that comes out of me tends to be in my style. Mm-hmm. It's an expression of my personality, I think, is what you're hearing. And so it's difficult for me not to sound like me, if that makes any sense. But at the same time, my favorite thing to write is the complete opposite of what I've just finished. So if I've just finished a piece in a minor key, I'll want to do a major key. If I just finished a major key piece, I'll want to maybe do a Latin dance or explore some kind of a style like Zydeco music, or figure out what the elements are and put together a jazz piece that string kids wouldn't otherwise get exposed to. Things like that. So I do like variety, which I think is one of the great benefits of being a commercial composer like we are, is that we have the freedom to do all these, explore all these different styles and all these different themes.
So, excuse me. As we've already mentioned, clarinet is your principal instrument, but obviously you have very high level expertise in string playing, in that you write so well for each instrument. They're so idiomatic for the instrument. Of course, as educational writers, that's part and parcel of what we do. If it's not idiomatic for the instrument, then you're probably not successful as an educational writer. But how did you develop your expertise in strings? And what are some of the sort of things you've learned about writing for strings through the years that you might tell younger composers, or maybe composers that just haven't written for strings yet?
Well, my advice would be pick up a string instrument. It's difficult to think about what they can do if you haven't actually physically done it yourself. Pick up a bow, pick up an instrument, figure out what the fingerings are, what is possible and what's not. I had a really good professor in my college years. We had music education classes where we'd take each section by turn. We would have a woodwind class, a brass class, the methods where we'd learn how to teach and figure out each of these instruments. And
was that Jerry Doan?
It was Jerry Doan.
Yeah.
and he was spectacular at strings. So coming from a woodwind perspective, as someone who had never picked up a string instrument at the time, he was great at explaining the methodology of how to teach strings. And whenever I write something for a line for strings, I'll always consider, how is this played? What string is this on? How would it be bowed? Taking careful consideration for everything I write as to its playability, because that is absolutely essential for what we do.
So I was just sitting here noticing, thinking about the pinball machines in the back, and there's something about that struck me as interesting. Is when I think about your music, and especially some of the very rhythmic things that you've written, there is sort of a pinball-like quality to it in terms of the rhythm and the randomness of the sound of the pinball machine. That's interesting. I never would have put that together if I hadn't seen that. But that might be a real.
One of the best compliments I ever received was when people say that my music sounds like video game music.
Yes.
I enjoy that.
I can absolutely see that. Right. Yeah. Well, that brings up sort of an interesting point, the whole sounds like thing. So when you have a definite style, that is a great thing, because of course it sort of, you've staked out your territory. It's hard for anyone else to be Doug Spata, that's for sure, right? Because you have this certain style. But that being said, do you ever find yourself ripping yourself off or writing something and going, have I written that before?
I do, yes, all the time. That's great, yeah. I write things and I'm like, how do I know this? Why does that sound familiar? Which is why I try to write down all of my chord progressions and try not to repeat a chord progression, because that's a surefire way to lead to the melody turning out the same or something happening like that. And yeah, it's one of the drawbacks of having a very specific style that you write in, that you're kind of known for, and that yeah, it's happened. Yeah, I've thought, well, I think I posted something on Facebook, and I wrote, posted like a screenshot of what I'd written, and I posted, what is this? Because I've looked on YouTube at every Marvel and Star Wars and pirate movie, and I can't figure out, and I know I've heard this before. And I think I figured out after a while that it was like an amalgamation of like the Pirates of the Caribbean with a little bit of the Force theme from John Williams and ending with some Lord of the Rings riff. And I just kind of Frankensteined it together. But yeah, that's a danger as well.
I think we've all done that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you go, yeah. One of my mentors and friends one time, in the world of writing, once sat down at the piano and wrote this wonderful Christmas arrangement for band, and got all done and told his wife, oh, you got to hear this. You got to hear this. I wrote this whole arrangement in 3 hours. It's amazing. She looked at him and said, you realize you wrote that exact arrangement 20 years ago? And he had. So I know you live in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is a great place. I live in Michigan, so we are state brothers, if you were. What are some of your favorite places to travel when you travel and you get out of the Midwest, which sometimes is hard to do because it's a great place to live. But yeah. Where do you like to go?
Well, it occurs to me that we should be going to Chicago right about now.
Yes, absolutely.
So I always look forward to Chicago every year around this time, and try to do something different because that's such a great city. Places I've been. Probably the most memorable trips I've taken were overseas. Very fortunate enough to take a few trips to Europe. I did Italy about 8 years ago, and had plenty of time to wander around Rome, Florence, and Venice. Before that, it was kind of a whirlwind tour, because like an overview of, we went through Italy, Austria, Switzerland, France, England, all in 2 weeks. It was like a crazy whirlwind.
If I was to listen to your playlist, your musical playlist, what are some of the kinds of things that you like to listen to? What are the different styles, genres, pieces, whatever? What are things that when you're just hanging out, you like to punch on?
put on and listen to. Um, I enjoy, well, a lot of the music that honestly, when I'm like driving around in the car, I'll have podcasts on, and I enjoy podcasts. When I'm running, I go out and, run in the mornings for about an hour. And to keep my heart rate up and keep the energy going, it's a lot of EDM music, a lot of new disco stuff, upbeat electronic music. Um,
Interesting.
you might hear that in my music as well. Otherwise, like a lot of people my age, I'm interested in the music of my youth, which was, 80s pop and ska music. Love the Toasters. My favorite band, I think I've seen them about 6 times in concert, is They Might Be Giants.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, love those guys.
Oh, that's terrific. So Doug, if you had
I should also mention that we have one of the best symphony orchestras ever in my city, but
Oh, absolutely.
they haven't been terribly active these days, and hopefully I'll get back to music hall sometime soon.
Young man that I had an orchestra at Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp one summer and got him kind of sort of started on the conducting binge. Was recently named it's going to be, I think, the resident conductor of the Pops Orchestra, Damon Gupton. He's a terrific young man, and he's not young, he's middle-aged, but relative to me, he's young. But anyway, so yeah, I was anxious to come down there and hear him conduct sometime.
That's great.
So just thinking about younger composers, like a lot of educational composers, you've already mentioned you didn't have a great deal of, let's put it this way, you didn't take a lot of composition classes in college, because I'm sure, like me, when you go to a conservatory type environment, there's just no room for you in the composition classes. You have to be a composition major, all that kind of thing. So you just got your start by writing. And so what advice do you have for particularly teachers that maybe think, I would love to try writing something, or I'd like to try arranging something, or so on and so forth. What advice do you have for them?
Well, I took a weird path. I started writing when I was like pretty much as soon as I picked up a clarinet, honestly, and learned my first like 5 notes. I'd start, doodling around on the notes, and then I'd want to write down my little doodles. And I bet I still have like notebooks somewhere in the back of a closet of all my 10-year-old doodles. And then it kind of grew from there, and I wanted to figure out how to better write melodies, how to write harmonies, how to do multiple parts. And I mostly read books. A lot of what I learned came from theory, orchestration, counterpoint books, just reading about it and digesting it and putting it into practice. For teachers who want to start writing for their students, I say just write with what you know, write with your students in mind. Know what they can do. And maybe as just a bit of advice, go a little bit under that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I think that's really good advice. I think the best educational composers, I think, are certainly writing with students in mind. They're writing with maybe their students or sort of a typical average middle school orchestra, high school orchestra, whatever. But I think that's some of the best ways to learn is when you have a group you can write for, right? It's so amazing to be able to do that and watch how they respond and what works and what doesn't work, so on and so forth. Well, Doug, this has been really a great time today, and for everybody out there, I just want to say, as you can tell, Doug's a very interesting person, and you might want to, if you're doing one of his pieces, contact him and see if you could hire him to come in via Skype clinic and listen and make some comments or those kinds of things. That might be a really fun thing for your kids to do. But in particular, I want to say, if you're not really familiar with Doug's music, you really should be. He's one of the standard go-to people in the string orchestra world in middle schools and high schools and some elementary and so on and so forth. So make sure you get on whatever site you get on and look at. Certainly the Alfred site has lots of Doug Spata pieces. So thanks, Doug. It was really great to talk to you, and we really appreciate you sharing your insights and wisdom with everybody today.
Great. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.
Thanks.